coming over, and we won't come back till it's over there.
Danielle, welcome to beautiful, beautiful wooded hillsides of France.
Oh, thank you. It looks like a lovely place for a vacation when war is not broken out.
This is the team-based squad first-person shooter called Verdun. And Danielle, have you heard anything at all about this game?
I have heard very little about this game. All I know is that it's a shooter and it's based in World War I.
It's the 100-year anniversary of the onset of hostilities in World War I. And a lot of things in the gaming world have been popping off, and in the media world, the entertainment world, to coincide with that anniversary. One of the games, I believe, that you reviewed last year from Ubisoft.
Valiant Hearts, The Great War. Yes.
Valiant Hearts. Absolutely adored that game and the storytelling that it was trying to do. There's very little narrative in this game here. This is all multiplayer combat, and it's a really strange brand of multiplayer combat, Danielle. Do you know anything about how World War I was fought?
All I know is sort of the very general high school history class sort of thing about trenches and the fact that the weaponry was probably far too advanced for what they were actually doing.
Okay. You've got enough knowledge to be dangerous, and I think that anybody that's coming to this game should have at least that level of knowledge. What we're doing is we're endeavoring on the first truly modern conflict in World War I. The hellish moonscape that you're seeing out in front of you used to be a wooded hillside in France. But at the opening of hostilities at the Battle of Verdun, which was a months-long endeavor, millions and millions of rounds of some of the largest artillery shells ever fired in war were dropped onto this battlefield to prepare it for the German advance. The French that survived that initial barrage, Danielle, described it as almost a garden hose of artillery that came down. So it obliterated entire hillsides and turned it into this crazy moonscape. And what you've got is the only way to survive is to stay as low as possible, and when you can't go any lower, you dig a trench and you get in it. But you still have these remnants of this, Napoleonic style warfare where they just send waves and waves of men towards the front and try and break through the enemy lines. But Napoleon didn't have machine guns.
Right. Yeah, big difference there.
So the way that they kind of simulate this in the game is there is a map, and that map features very firm front lines. And as you advance on the enemy, your commanding officer, who's kind of this game-controlled AI that's commanding your larger unit, tells you, all right, assault. And if you can establish yourself in the enemy's trenches, the assault continues. But if that assault loses momentum, it says, all right, turn around, you've got to get back to our trenches, and you've got to defend against the enemy counterattack. So there's this back and forth assault that happens on each of the maps in the game Verdun, where one team is allowed to assault and the other team is allowed to defend.
Wow, so it probably captures, I'm imagining, just seeing this now and hearing you speak about it, probably captures the futility that your average soldier probably felt being part of these massive, deadly attacks.
Life is so cheap in this game. It's horrifying to watch and to be part of this game. But it's also really unlike any shooter experience I've ever played. The style of gameplay is completely different. There's this weird mixture of instances where you have to run and gun because you can't just sit there in no man's land. You have to advance in the enemy, or you're going to get bombed to smithereens by the wave of artillery that's coming down from the enemy. But then you also have to play this bizarre cat and mouse game where you can't see anything because you're only 6 inches off the ground.
Sure, yeah. And you're probably, would have been sort of advancing by crawling, more or less, if you were actually in this scenario, I imagine, just to sort of keep your head down.
Yeah. There's actually, they've spent a great deal of time detailing the actual battlefields. I believe this one is from the very early days, perhaps the opening day of the Verdun battle, where you can actually still see the trees. And as you move from level to level, it completely changes till, in some of the levels, there's just nothing but barbed wire and mud.
Wow. There was a sense of that a little bit in Valiant Hearts, not to talk about a game that we're not currently playing, but there was a little bit of a sense of that progression. I mean, that was certainly a more story-based game, but it seems like the story is all the mechanics here, which I also sort of dig that approach. Oh, gas mask, of course. Perfect.
Well, there's actually 3 or 4 different kinds of gas in the game. This is actually a cloud of mustard gas, which will affect your throat and your lungs. But you throw your gas mask on with the 4 key, and then your vision is completely obscured. So you're fighting in this trench on this bizarre landscape, and you can't see anything.
Yeah, and I can imagine that was probably how the soldiers felt who actually had to experience this.
But there's this weird tension of, have they made this game too real? Have they not made it real enough? I'm not actually sure that the game is as violent as I have heard World War I was, and yet they're going for this realism with the weapons that they're using and with the landscapes that's very foreign and very alien to players.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thought. I mean, you play more war games of this. Not of this style necessarily, but, sort of more realistic war games than I have ever played. So I want to hear what your opinion is on, is this fun? Should it be fun?
There were long stretches of the game where, honestly, I was very bored. I was standing there waiting for something to happen. The matchmaking wasn't all that great. I ended up on matches where there was one player on the other side, and I've got a full squad, and I'm waiting for another squad to join. But then, late after I'd spent about 3 or 4 hours with the game, I finally got together with a group of my friends where we play a lot of Arma together, and we got together and we got in a match. We started talking and communicating, and there was this real type of learning that we did. We were learning about the enemy on that particular map. We were learning about the map itself, and we were working together. And the game was rewarding us for that, so that you'll actually get points in a match for teamwork. You'll get points in a match for retreating at the right time. The game wants to give you those types of feedbacks. It's just not the kind of rewards that people are used to in most games.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense.
There is an unlock system as well, so as you get better, you get career points, I believe they're called, and it's a little challenging to figure out how to cash those career points in. Their user interface isn't the best, but once you do, you're able to unlock, things like bayonets or small submachine guns or different skins that your player can wear that actually provide you some real camouflage and real benefit in these weird landscapes that you're fighting across.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So is this developer a developer that has worked on more realistic sort of war games before?
I don't know much about the developer.
Okay.
I'm going to need to look into that a little bit. But what struck me as interesting about this and, about their business model, there's no American troops in this game right now. These are all European units. I mean, the American forces definitely fought in World War I, but not until much later in the war. But they launched this thing without even a consideration. Their commitment to that historical accuracy was that important to them. If you're looking for a period war game, a period shooter, and you're tired of that, World War II trope, that same game, the same storming of the Normandy beaches that you're always playing, this is about as far from it, while still keeping those same kinds of trappings as you can get.
Oh, interesting. And how does it play mechanically as a shooter? Does it feel good? Does it feel appropriately clunky, perhaps, for the weaponry that you're using?
That's exactly the way I would put it. It feels appropriately clunky. There's some decent ballistic modeling, but the animations really don't cater well to this kind of environment. I mean, look at it. They're stumbling up hills. The clipping is an issue. People are laying down and floating in midair. But
sure.
As far as the first-person perspective when you're inhabiting that avatar, it's really an interesting experience. $22.99 is the full price of this game. I think it's something that if you're interested in team-based or historical simulation of any kind, it's definitely one that you should pick up.
Awesome. Thanks for showing it to me, Charlie.
Well, thanks for taking the time.